Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome into the Mental Advantage Podcast. So, Brandon, a lot of feedback that we've been getting. First of all, how are you doing? I feel like a lot of times I just jump into the show. Are you all right?
I'm
doing good?
Yeah, I'm great. How about you?
Thanks for asking. No, I do. I will sometimes listen back to those, and I always laugh at myself. Like I just get ready to. I think one show, one time it was like I just started talking to the guest, and you were like, "Hey, oh, by the way, there's Brandon. He's the other voice you're going to hear on the show."
I've been in a lot of relationships that are like that, so I'm used to it.
Yeah. Well, this has been a long standing. This is one of our longest relationships we have, actually.
You're right about that, brother.
Yeah.
You are right about that.
So I guess we could, there's not need for couples therapy or anything like that. We're doing pretty good.
No, yeah, I think so.
But what I was getting ready to say is that I don't know about you, but I've heard both in my personal life and also in the show life, through some emails and stuff, a lot of feedback on the Dr. Matt Park episode, which both of us thought would probably be the case, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was it's really dynamic, right? I mean, I think we talked about it, just a wealth of knowledge there, and it just, I guess I shouldn't be surprised now that we're 2 years in, 2.5 in. Just the willingness of all of these really, really bright people and experts, right? That are willing to come on and talk, and he was as good as we've had.
And what I love about the format of this show, and this might not come as a shock to the listeners, is it's not necessarily, or we have an outline, but, and there's certain topics that we know we want to bring up, especially if they've written a book or if they have a particular format or platform that they use. But what I've loved about this show from the very beginning is you can come in with a plan, but depending on how the conversation goes, it will sometimes just take you down a path that you weren't expecting, but is also very organic and very valuable. And so we'll just kind of let that continue to play itself out when it happens, because that's the fun of it. Is I think we want this. We've always said we wanted this podcast to be more a conversation that you would just be like the listeners just listening in to us talking to somebody, and just the way it would happen normally.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that. That's typically, if you allow the guests to actually have that format, and they know that they can kind of go wherever they want to with it, and it's not necessarily the scripted thing. It tends to allow for more of a natural. And it allows them to talk about what they want to talk about.
Exactly.
Right? So.
Yeah, no. And the reason I bring that up is because one of the things early in the Dr. Matt Park episode was we were talking about burnout and just in general, not even employee specific, but just in general. And it prompted one of the emails that we got this week was from a lady by the name of Tiffany in Ohio. I will protect Tiffany's, private information by not mentioning her last name, so that people weren't like, "Oh, Tiffany, I know Tiffany," but
oh, I know her. Yeah, she's the one that listens to that podcast.
Yeah. Her last name's Allen. Okay. No,
Yeah.
no, but Tiffany in Ohio, she said, I found the podcast with Dr. Matt to be very informative, especially the early discussion about burnout. I'm wondering what your all's thoughts are on how quiet quitting compares to burnout. And I got to tell you, Brandon, that was one of the probably more consistent comments I got from that show was around burnout. Everybody seemed to resonate with everybody, but also it prompted this thought, an idea like, is that what quiet quitting's all about? And so, I mean, I kind of was like, I don't really think it is, but I wanted to be sure. So I did a little research on my own.
Sure.
And I think it's important to understand that, you know, like with quiet quitting, it's kind of more that rebellion against like the hustle culture, if you will. It's like this boss is asking you to do more and more and more. And burnout, I think, is more of a you can't control necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know. So one for sure. I think the reason burnout resonates with everybody is that I think at some level, all of us either have something in our life that has is just taxing, right? It's just this thing that it never seems to be enough. And so, you know, I think from that perspective, burnout is something that resonates with everybody.
Right.
I think, and it's across the board, right? I mean, it could literally be anything. But I think for the quiet quitting piece, you know, my personal take on it, and it's probably a little confusing and a little more in depth than what Tiffany was hoping for. But I do think that quiet quitting is almost this form of like you said, rebellion. It's got a little bit of a cancel culture feel to it for me, in terms of just a younger generation type of a thing. I think that, you know, as an employer, I think the days of having someone want to come in and just do everything possible and be great is gone. I think, quite frankly, the social experiment that was the pandemic put or reshifted or reprioritized things for people. I think most people really don't understand the impact that they have on their organization that they work for. I really believe that. I think that people looked at COVID and oh, well, look, I'm over here, and I'm able to do what I'm supposed to do or what the company needs me to do, but I'm also able in the middle of the day to, you know, work on 3 projects around the house and this, that, and the other. And so that's just what I'm going to do because I need to have a work-life balance. What I don't think people understand from a quiet quitting perspective is the impact that their absence actually has. I think, you know, again, this is going kind of deep, but I think people don't value themselves as much as they should. I think that so many people get tied into followers and clicks and likes, and that's my impact, and it's not. And, you know, being around people day to day and interacting with people day to day, that is wildly, wildly important. And I think that this idea of I will just do what you're asking me to do, no more, no less, and at 5 o'clock I'm gone, And if you don't like it, then I'll go somewhere else. It's going to be really interesting to see now that I think the economy's kind of taken, it's an easy stance to have, I guess, is my point. When the economy's chugging and there are plenty of opportunities out there. We'll see how quiet quitting works out for everybody when they're scrambling to keep their jobs because people are doing layoffs and things like that.
So I think this is very interesting. And you brought up one of the things that I was thinking about is COVID impact, right? It's the pandemic. Mm-hmm. It's when people started working from home. Mm-hmm. And I also think that there was no disconnect between home and work. So that allowed, as you said, people to, in their, however they wanted to frame it, multitask, but I also think that it allowed them to now, when they came back, and some people haven't even come back, they're still working from home. And I think that a lot of these individuals who are quote unquote quiet quitting would probably say, well, I'm having impact on my job. I'm just not doing it. I'm not going above and beyond, right? Like, so to play devil's advocate there, they're saying, I'm just saying I'm going to do it from this time frame. So I'll give you an example of this. Yesterday, I saw a funny thing on online that was, it was one of those question forums. It wasn't like Reddit. It was like Quora. Is there a Quora or something like that? Yeah. So I don't know when I got signed up for this, like as part of like the, one of those things where they send you every day, like, here's the question of the day or whatever. There's somebody yesterday, and it plays nicely in with what we're talking about right now. Somebody yesterday sent in a question that said, I have 2 employees who usually leave work at 6 p.m. each day. They are good employees, but I do not like that their commitment lasts only for working hours. What should I do as the boss? Here was the first answer, which I thought was hysterical. This person won the internet yesterday. Said, I have a boss who pays me for working between the hours of 9 to 6 each day. He is a good boss, but I do not like that his commitment to paying me lasts only during working hours. What should I do as the employee? And I was like, what the heck? So I think therein lies the dilemma, right? It's like, and this is a, really, as you said earlier, it can kind of take you down a lot of different paths, but sure. I think it is something that you and I grew up in a little bit, not to age ourselves, but a little bit of a different generation. I do think you're onto something there, because my mind went right away to generationally. It went right away to, we were brought up to go the extra mile. You want to do, everybody else who's average is just going to do what's expected. But if you want to be above average, then you need to do a little bit more. Right. And I think somewhere along the line, though, and I want to say the only reason I say, I guess it's generational, although I think people who are our age are also quiet quitting in their jobs, is because there's this like, COVID really, I think, gave people this appreciation for, because I was working from home more, I now realized how much I was missing at home. And so now I'm not going to, when I go back to work, I'm not going to give 120% to my job. I'm going to give 100% to my job when I'm there, and I'll give 100% to my work, or my home life when I'm not at my job. You know what I mean? Like, so I just think some people might look at that and say, well, okay, well, that's just finding balance, but we just labeled it quiet quitting. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that would be the alternate thought.
I know, and I can respect that. I think though the challenge is this. We talk about it a lot. How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Right.
And I think if you are willing, I would be willing to bet that if you are of the mindset that this is just a job, right? And again, I'm not saying that, because we talk about identity a lot and not having your identity, you're John, and it's not your John, the guy that works here,
right,
or your career. you're John. And so I do think that at times people can get wrapped up in their in their careers and stuff like that. I think the challenge that I have is you brought something up, and I think it's two totally different things. And it also kind of goes back to what your opening question is. I think people of our age, right? They don't quiet quit. They're suffering from burnout, right? Because they are 20, 30 years in to a career, and there's this respite at some point, and now they're having a very difficult time to get motivated to go back in the way that they did, because they see it as, oh my gosh, look how quick this was taken away from me. Right. And I think that's one mindset. I think the quiet quitting is happening on a much younger generation. I mean, these are what I would say 32 and under types of employees. And I'm not trying to, because there's a lot of, I mean, there's outliers and there's a lot of hard workers everywhere, but that is more of a mindset in more of a proactive way of handling their job and wanting to have this work-life balance, by going, well, screw them, I'm only going to do whatever. But they are the same ones that want to come in for a raise. They do want to, above and beyond, the inflationary stuff. The challenge that I see with all of it, John, is that the collective we, just feels like there's an opportunity around every corner. And we've at times we don't want to pour into that thing there's very few people anymore that want to be great. And to me, that's the bigger challenge, right? Is that we want things quickly. We expect to be awesome at it without a whole lot of effort and work. And if it doesn't happen, then we'll just go to the next one.
Yeah. I almost think that it's, I think this whole discussion is fascinating to me. I think we can split a lot of different hairs, because sure. I almost think that when you were describing some of that under 30, under 35 age, and some of those behaviors almost become more entitlement than they do 100%. Quiet quitting. Like it's
100%.
Because I think about just as a leader for a large organization within the last 2 years, mm-hmm. I can think of 3 different situations where I had people equal to my age or just a little bit below my age. Mm-hmm. At 51 for the listeners that, that they, it came to me and said, John, one thing that this pandemic taught me, or one thing that COVID taught me, was just a different appreciation for what I'm missing at home or my home life and stuff like that. And I think we even talked about this on one of the shows, is that, so I almost think that I think that this last 2 or 3 years, mm-hmm. I think in general has given people, and I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent, but different perspectives on everything that they're doing, their sure. approach to certain things or whatever. So I think that's one thing. I also think, though, that you hit on something else that's even more important, epidemic, if you will, is that these people that for whatever reason feel like, okay, the more I do, more is expected of me. Mm-hmm. And so then therefore that becomes that burnout that you talk about, because mm-hmm. I almost think that, when you are that person who is gone and you're doing so much at work and you're not feeling like you're getting rewarded for it, but that sure. it's doing is increasing the demands that your boss now has for you, because you've shown that you're going to go and work some mm-hmm. on the weekend, or you're going to go above and beyond or whatever, then now all of a sudden that becomes burnout. So I want to read a quick little blurb here, because I thought this was really an interesting thing. And for the listeners, they can find this article. It was in the Atlantic from last September. It was called "The Cure for Burnout is Not Self-Care." And they interviewed in this article Amelia, I should say, Nagoski, who's a co-author with her sister Emily of the book Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And she says, and I just want to read this to get your thoughts on this. She says in this, burnout begins with unceasing demands and unmeetable goals, just what I was talking about there. Mm-hmm. The kinds that employers thrive on as they squeeze their employees, not just for their time and labor, but for their obedience, their humanity, and their souls. A little dramatic, but a lot of those demands are unspoken cultural expectations rather than actual work requirements. And they comprise the bullshit that workers abandon when they quiet quit. Then this is the last comment. She says, if we don't abandon the cultural demands that require us to conform in ways that aren't natural to us, burnout progresses as we worry about the gap between who we are and who we are expected to be. When we understand that we will never cross that divide, and we see that we truly don't want to be the people that we are told we should be, we are free to understand our worth on our own terms. Now, here I think, Brandon, is really what, and this cuts through both of us, but this is where I think this conversation could go a whole different direction.
Sure.
We don't have enough time for it, but I think this is one of those things that what I hear when I read that is, it's not even so much about the boss. It's not even so much about the job. It's about this idea that we have reached a point in society where we're just not going to conform. We are going to rebel against every single thing.
Oh, sure.
We're not going to be obedient. We're not going to follow the rules. And if the rules you have, this older generation, is that we have to work harder, that we have to go above and beyond, that we have to do all those things, then screw it. We're not going to do that. We're not going to follow the rules of the game that you've been playing for so many years. And so now we can't just not do those things. We have to put a label to it, right? We have to somehow justify or, give it credence, and credibility.
Yeah. And just like a lot of things, to me, it sounds like an excuse. I mean, if I'm just being straight up about it, it sounds like a reason. I hear that and I go, that's a reason not to be great.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like, if you're in a job and you don't particularly care for it, then why not go? If you're that brave, if you're that committed, why don't you go be an entrepreneur?
Right. Go do something that you can set your own schedule. And I look, I mean, I hear you loud and clear, because I keep thinking about, I don't know what the quote is. Usually it's not like me to mess those up, but it's something to the idea of, like, it's why successful people have no patience for average people. Like, They just can't like get their heads around that, because it doesn't resonate. Like, I cannot understand why this person doesn't want to go above and beyond, why they don't want to maximize all their talents. And I do think that there is, and we'll kind of shift away from even the burnout, the quiet quitting thing, but I do think there's a deeper issue here 100%. That you've tapped into, which is this idea. And you and I were exchanging some text messages this week, and you were like, why do people not want to be great? Like, why you asked that question, and I've been thinking about it. It's not the first time you and I have had that discussion, and it's not the first time we've thought about that, but it really is an interesting thing. I don't know if you've seen any of Netflix Full Swing yet. The
100%. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting to you and I think this goes to what Dr. Mo, who's going to be on our show again here in a couple of weeks, and Brett McCabe, who works with the golfers, Dr. Matt Park, who works with the golfers. Like, the reason so many of these golfers are starting to get mental performance guys, sports psychologists to work with them is in a sport, and we've talked about this before, where all your skills are pretty equal. Any one of those guys can go out and put
100%.
great. I mean, it's not, trust me.
I mean, number 1 through 1,000.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's difference of like a stroke or two as far as average, it's just a matter of putting those together. Now, having said that, and this is, I'm steering a little bit off of this idea of like why do people not want to be great, is it almost becomes also, there's another subplot to this, is it's not why they don't want to be great. It's what's preventing them from being great sometimes. And I think it's that mental side of it. A lot of times, like when I watch that Full Swing and you're talking about, I can't remember if it was, which golfer it was, but one of them is like in the hunt towards the end of a tournament and it almost just completely falls apart because, and he even mentions in there, I don't know what it is. Like, I can't get myself to get over that hump of being, allowing myself to put the bad stuff behind me. It was like one bad shot all of a sudden started to fall into another bad shot, another bad shot, and that trickled down from it. So I think that's another danger in there.
It is, but I think you've got a couple of different things, right? For a golfer and anybody that's gotten to that level, commitment usually isn't an issue, right? Yeah. Let's be honest. Like if for the listeners, if anyone that you know, or if you have happened to have played, any type of athletic endeavor beyond high school, you're in the top 3-4%, period.
Right. Yeah.
Across the board. And if you get to play beyond that, you're elite.
Yes.
That's just, you're pretty elite just getting to college at any level. You get above that and, you're one of what I call the lucky drips, right? I think we've talked about it before. I look at really anything. It's a giant funnel. You go up top. Anybody can participate. If you sign up, if you pay, you can play. And as you continue to work your way down that funnel, which is, little league to, middle school to travel / AAU / 7-on-7 / whatever. And as you continue to work your way down, there's only going to be 1 or 2 little drips that come out of the bottom of that funnel. And so anyway, my point is the guys and girls that get to that level, there's at least commitment there, right? The challenge that I see is the quitting on themselves before they ever have a chance to commit to it.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's one thing if it just doesn't pan out. Right. I could talk all day about that. It happened for me. It got done, went and played some independent baseball. And you know what? At some point you go, I'm like 24 and this is where I'm at. And I don't see how this is progressing. And at some point you're done. I think the challenge is people don't allow themselves the opportunity to go out there and be great. They cut it off before it happens. They don't want to be made fun of because of what it takes. I think it's just such a layered issue, right? You've got some people that have a background where mom and dad aren't supporting them. They don't have the support structure and they'd rather just not hear about it, deal with it, whatever. They rip the Band-Aid off. They don't have to deal with it anymore. Then you've got others that really do want to do it, but they don't know how to do it. And they're scared to death that, someone may make fun of them, that they're going to fail, that they're going to go viral for all the wrong reasons. It just on and on, fill in the blank. But I think the sad thing to me is, and I've heard Goggins talk about this before. I've heard a lot of and read a lot about this, but this whole idea of what it takes to be great, whether it's your job or an athletic endeavor or anything, is it takes time and commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And people just aren't willing to do it. But the funny thing is, they'll give any app on social media, they'll give that 4 hours a day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not even think about it. But they won't invest in themselves for an extra hour or 2 or 4. And that to me is the sad thing about all of it.
Well, they also will give themselves this escape of saying, well, everybody else is putting that same time into social media or spending time watching that app or whatever. It's the comparator. It's like, what do you, it's like, if you're comparing yourselves, and we've talked about this before, is, successful people, the main difference is they just are willing to do the things that successful people do. And they don't want to do anything else. I look at, I've been watching some of the XFL since last weekend. And, you just touched on it a minute ago about when your baseball career is coming to an end, you went and played independence ball or whatever. I think those people that have that drip factor, so they may not be the final drip in the whole thing, but they at least have that drip factor. I think, Brandon, they almost have a mentality where you have to have an intervention with them to say, hey, it's like you've squeezed everything you can out of the opportunity. Like, it's time to move on and go to do something else. You know what I mean? And I think that's like, we know those people. But when I'm watching the XFL, it's funny because I was watching the game last night. You have AJ McCarron, who, of course, we know from his Alabama fame, played in the NFL for a while. That's been a minute, right? I mean, that all the way back to AJ McCarron and Barrett Jones in the game against Notre Dame. That was a while ago. But so he's been journeyman throughout the NFL for a little bit. But still has that can't quit, won't quit mentality, who's, back out there competing in the XFL, still has a lot of the same characteristics about him from a player standpoint. And that it's been interesting 2 weeks in a row that he has had opportunities at the end of the game where he's been behind and has brought his team back to win. 2 weeks in a row, Ben DiNucci, who of course played at JMU with Mac and was one of Mac's roommates, has had 2 games in a row where things at the end of the game, opportunities, and found a way to lose, right? I mean, it's the difference of, and so you watch these games and you think, what does that do from a psyche standpoint for both of those players? But they're both still showing up the next week. Like, Ben DiNucci will still be back showing up the next week. Probably, to be honest with you, at this point, one of the most vilified people on Twitter or one of those things, like, people, you just type in DiNucci in a search thing during an XFL football game, and some of the memes and some of the things that you will see pop up about him are crazy, which always kind of cracks me up, to be honest with you, just because, I mean, to your point earlier, the drips. I mean, this person, even in the XFL, you're one of a rare. You played in the NFL. You're one of the elite. Rare. Yeah. To watch some of the keyboard warriors like go in on some of these players just cracks me up. But
and the fact and that kind of goes in, not to interrupt, but the fact that they even think that they should matter.
Right.
They've
earned
part
the right.
Of the problem.
Yes.
You've never been there. You have no idea of the level of commitment it takes to accomplish what any of those men and women have accomplished. And here's the other thing too.
Yep.
And it's interesting that you talk about Netflix, they also have that Last Chance You.
Yes.
Right. Both on the football and basketball side. What I think a lot of people, when they watch that, they're watching that going, hey, oh my gosh, look at these guys and look at this, look at that. And yeah, they're not great facilities, and they're not, it's there's a reason they call it Last Chance You. What I see though is, and I love this, because even don't get bogged down with the fact that these are college age kids, and yes, they've got complaints, and yes, they've got this, that, and the other. But you know what? They've got a passion for whatever that sport is, and they're willing to play at a place where these are the facilities, where yes, our locker room is shared by everyone else on campus, that we warm up in the same hall that I may have attended my English class earlier in the day. They love that enough that they're willing to fight and claw for it. And I have nothing but respect for them.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I always look at that Last Chance You, and I see two different paths that they can take, right? One is they can take the approach of, this is a reset. This is an opportunity to climb back up. I'm going to get back in the grind, and I'm not going to look at the excuse of we have bad facilities. I'm going to go and just put the work in, do whatever it takes. And then you love to cheer and applaud when those guys get their chance to get back into a D1 program or D2, D3, whatever the case may be, but they get a chance to move on and do great things. Then there's the other path that, and we talk about, this life is about choices all the time. The other choice that a person can make, and you see some of them do that, is they go there for, oh yeah, coach, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm willing to grind and all that. Then about halfway through the semester, they start to look around and they're like, how did I end up in this place? I was at a D1 program. I was getting fed every day. We flew to our games. We did all this stuff or whatever. And now I'm here. And the coaches all say the same thing to them, but you're here. Like, you can come in here acting like you're doing everybody a favor all you want, but guess what? You're here, just like we're here, so don't come in here with this attitude like you're so much better than everybody, because it's that attitude that got you here, right? Because you weren't willing to put in, you thought you were entitled to it. See how this all comes full circle now, is the same mentality. Those choices that have to be made out in the real world is the same choices that are being made by people who are like, I'm not going to do more than I'm supposed to do. I'm not going to push beyond my comfort level. I'm not going to do all these things. And you want to say to them, but you're here, like you're here you're in the same spot. So with anything, guys, and this is for the listeners, because we don't want to just be about the discussion today, although hopefully you've been able to pick up some stuff from that. But it comes back to the idea that there's a choice you can make. You can be committed, or you can be searching for confidence. You can be disciplined, or you can be searching for motivation. The commitment and discipline will get you further, but you've got to make those choices to go say, I'm going to embrace the grind. I'm going to embrace the suck. I'm going to embrace the suffering. I'm going to invite the challenge, as Dr. Mo says, but I've got to make that choice to go do the hard stuff to be able to get to the things that I want to get to. Or you can have the choice of being reactionary, deflecting, blaming other people, finding cute phrases like quiet quit and different things like that to explain why you're just average.
Or you're 100% right on all that. But as you're talking, here's the one thing that I wonder, and again, this is a big deal. And when you show up to a place like that, I mean, I'm going to talk from experience. I mean, you show up and you know that you're getting ready to live the next 5 months, 6 months, making $600, $680 was actually the check.
Yeah.
Right. It was $820. It was like $680 take home. But there was hope.
Yeah.
There was hope that
you're chipping a chair. You're still in the game.
That's it. I'm here.
Yeah.
I still got a uniform. They hadn't taken my pants away from me yet.
Yep.
I'm still out here. I'm grinding. I got a name on the back of this thing. It's my name. And
people are still showing up to watch you play.
That's it. And I'm here. So I wonder if part of this quiet quitting, if this whole lack of enthusiasm across the board is because, some of the younger generation feels hopeless. And have we poisoned the well with all the social media bullshit and all that kind of stuff, touting this kind of doom and gloom instead of saying, hey man, you're still living in the best time to have ever been alive. Right? I mean, honestly, like yes, things may not go great for you. Yes, you may have to actually go earn that opportunity. But if you're here and you're this side of the daisies, man, you got to have hope.
For the listeners, you all may remember Ashley Merriman, who wrote the book Top Dog, The Science of Winning and Losing, or co-authored the book. But, I was thinking about, just as you were talking about it, Brandon, so we talked about on the show with her is this idea of success-oriented and failure-avoidant. And it's like, there's two types of people. Is one's, driven to succeed. The other one is driven to avoid the failure, or promotion focused and prevention focused, I think was the thing. But man, there's so much. I mean, what we're talking about right now is such a deeper, you talk about starting to unpeel the layers there is like, what is that thing that's holding me back? And I would honestly, suggest to the listeners, if you think about your own personal lives and you think about where you are in whatever you're doing, whether you're wanting to be the best parent you can be, whether wanting to be the best, worker, the best, athlete, whatever the case may be, is if there's things that are still holding you back, like you need to start asking that question of like, am I afraid to succeed? Or am I just afraid to fail? Because, you can have, there's a difference there. I mean, there's, like we talked about earlier, the fear of success is like, well, with more is expected kind of a thing. But then that fear of failure, if you feel you're stuck in that, understand that's okay, number one, but also just kind of, that's when I would really encourage you to start thinking about what is your, is that being driven by external factors? Are you afraid that other people are going to say that you're a failure? Because that's when we can get ourselves into some deep trouble, is if we start worrying so much about what other people are thinking about us at all. And that's, at all. And that's limiting us to, not maybe try our best because we're afraid, well, if I don't do this, everybody's going to make a comment and, have something to say. And, that's where social media, of course, has had an influence on that. But, really, I think goes back to those choices, that you can kind of make throughout the course of the day, and journaling at the end of the day, journaling at the beginning of the day of gratitude, but also journaling at the end of the day and reflecting back on the choices you made throughout the day. And do you think that is driving you closer to success, or moving you out of your comfort zone, moving you beyond? Or did you choose the path of status quo? Did you choose the path today of average, to where you just did the what was expected, the bare minimum? Right. And if you were choosing that, was that because that was being driven from a place of fear of failure, or fear of, like whatever, like just, and again, it all comes back to what we've talked about before, is self-assessment is the key to everything that we talk about on the show. It's like honest self-assessment. Yeah. And understand there's places you can go and get resources and stuff like that. But if you want to read more about that whole success oriented and, failure avoidant, which is fascinating stuff, just look up any of that stuff with Ashley Merriman and Poe Bronson there from Top Dog: The Science of Winning and Losing, because it's really fascinating. And it's not just sports related. It talks about all of that. People, I think, sometimes equate winning and losing to sports, but heck, I mean, it's life. You're winning and losing in life
every day with every decision. That's it.
Yep. Great way to wrap it up, man. I appreciate it. We're going to have Dr. Mo. Speaking of winners, he's been around a lot of winners and is a winner himself. We're going to have him on the show coming up. We're also going to have Roger Kitchen. Some of the listeners may remember. We're going to have him talking about, and hopefully with the coach from Hampton Sydney, one of the programs that he's working with. And we'll get them to break down some of the things they're doing. And again, how we started the show was talking about Tiffany from Ohio, probably also a natural winner. We'll give a shout out to Tiffany. She's a listener, right?
If she's a listener, she's won.
That's right.
If she's made it to this episode, we don't end have of the any episode. Question about grinding, commitment. I don't know how much hope she probably has left, but yeah.
If she didn't make her own exit off of the interstate or something, but
exactly.
So, but it reminds me, guys, we do have an inbox, an email that you can write to podcast@mentaladvantage.net. Definitely, if you have any comments, we really, really would love to hear your comments. We don't read them all, but we always like to hear what people are thinking about it. And I have a feeling, quite honestly, Brandon, that, because some of the old man in us came out earlier in the show, some people may disagree with what we think about burnout and quiet quitting. And we're open for that. Let us know. If you disagree, and
maybe we're having a "Hey Boomer" moment. Could
be.
I could understand that.
Yeah, and we'll read your comment next week on the show and let everybody hear what you have to say about it. So, podcast@mentaladvantage.net, and that will do it for today. We'll wrap it up, but thanks. We will talk with you all soon.
Take care.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.